Part 2, when a celebrity came into my work and refused to pay. I wasn't sure what I was seeing at first. I thought maybe she'd gone to get her wallet from her car or something, but this isn't the kind of place where a lot of people drive. I just knew in my gut that I had to follow up because her server definitely wouldn't. I went out of the door and yup, she was trip-sitting down the street, tapping away on her phone like nothing was wrong in the world. I called out to her and she half turned around, then realizing I was from the restaurant, tried to pretend she hadn't heard me and went right back to walking, quickening her pace a little. I would have laughed if I wasn't so pissed. So I jogged to catch up with her and was trying to keep the situation nice and calm and allow her to save as much face as possible, and was just like, "Oh, hi, sorry, there's just a little matter of the bill," knowing damn well she didn't forget, but figuring confronting her would just feed into unnecessary drama. She looks at me in total disbelief and says that she was going to Instagram or meal with us, and that's typically enough when she goes out, without a hint of sarcasm or embarrassment. So I didn't know who she was because her reaction to being on TV was such a laughingstock on campus, but, and maybe this was a little mean, but I couldn't resist. I went, "Sorry, who are you?" And she effing lost it, insisting that I knew exactly who she was and that I was jealous of her and that, wait for it, that's why I was forcing her to pay for her food she ordered at the restaurant. I didn't want to be overly mean, so rather than antagonize her further, though it was very low-hanging fruit, I just told her, "Look, if you don't plan on paying, we'll have to involve the police." She laughed and said, "Well, if you don't know who I am, you won't be able to find me, right?" Honestly, she had me there, but I didn't need to admit to her that I really knew who she was, because for all she knew, we had security cameras or would describe her really well. So I let her walk off and I went back to the restaurant and called the police. It was absurdly easy to track her down because I didn't know who she was and that she was posting geotagged posts online all day, including a super angry post about how she had eaten at a restaurant and it had been terrible. So she incriminated herself and led the police right to her. I doubt the cops would have followed up so diligently if it were only us, but apparently she'd walked out on a couple other places that generally didn't recognize her and expected her to pay up, and posted angrily about how the businesses sucked, further incriminating herself. They didn't know who she was, but they described her well enough, and that paired with the post was enough for the police to drag her in. Our trainee server actually had to go down somewhere to identify her. He was terrified when he was first asked, but when he came back he was totally giddy and thought the whole experience was pretty cool. This is why you shouldn't go hunting alone at night. I'm a hunter and I like to hunt wild boar specifically. For those of you that don't know, boar are a big problem in the US. A sow can have 2 litters a year and it's not uncommon for a litter to consist of 10 or more pigs. Given that pigs eat anything and everything, it's not hard to see why the Department of Fish and Wildlife makes it legal to hunt them with almost no restrictions. In my state, it's illegal to hunt most large mammals with night or thermal vision scopes with the exception of boar and coyote. I'd been saving for a year. When I got it, I took it to a range and sighted it in. There was an area that was peppered with boar activity that I knew would be perfect for a night hunt. The night started uneventful, mostly me tinkering with my new toy, cycling through the settings. I was a little impatient. I'd spotted multiple deer, but they were out of season, and like I mentioned earlier, my current setup wasn't legal for deer. I moved to another spot I'd seen days earlier that probably wasn't much better than my first, but it gave me something to do and a new angle to look around with my new scope. After an hour or so of glassing the area, it dawned on me. This spot doesn't have much animal activity at all. No rabbits or owls, and the deer that I'd seen were hundreds of yards from where I was. Why was this pocket of land so dead at night but lively in the day? I'd set up around 10 p.m. and it was about 2 a.m. when I started to think about packing up, maybe setting up a target before I left. I heard a crunch come from the direction I came from before. I panned my scope over and saw a silhouette of a small bear. It's important to note that my scope isn't exactly night vision, it's a thermal scope, kind of like a black and white version of what you see in the Predator movies. I adjusted my range and zoomed in. I remember jolting a little when I saw that it wasn't actually a bear, it was a man. Because he was so low and hunched over, I thought I was looking at a young bear. Is that a game warden? It couldn't be. I would have seen the headlights coming up the road from where I was perched. And where would he have walked from? I was 30 miles away from anything on public lands. I was about to call out when I noticed he was naked. No shoes, pants, or anything. I remember being disturbed by his movements like a squirrel or something, twitching and grabbing at the foliage, sniffing around and palming the tree. Was that my tree? The one I'd been leaning against earlier? Could he smell me? The thought terrified me. Then he did something that I still have nightmares about to this day. He squatted and placed his hands in the dirt between his feet and stared straight up like a dog mid-howl. And I heard it, a voice coming from that direction, a female voice. "Help! I'm lost!" There was a long pause, but neither of us moved a muscle. Part 2, why you shouldn't go hunting alone at night. The center of my sights was trained at the dirt in front of his feet. I couldn't bring myself to aim directly at another person. Were they lost? Was it some guy that had gone crazy out here? Why was his voice so feminine? "Help! Please, I can't walk!" the voice called out. That's when I called BS. Not only could he walk, but when I first saw him, he was traversing the land with ease for a naked person. So good that I mistook him for a bear. That's an effing trap. This guy's trying to lure me to him with some damsel in distress routine. Luckily, the lack of activity before had caused me to pack up most of my gear. I think I may have left behind a hat and a sitting pad, but I didn't give a shit in that moment. I took my eyes off of him for a moment to get my pack on. I buckled my chest strap and scrambled for my rifle. To my horror, he was in the same position, but his face was staring in my direction, and I swear I saw a smile. How the hell had he heard me get up and put my gear on? He must have been easily 150 yards away. "F off!" I screamed in that direction. He stood upright and it hit me how tall and skinny he was. Easily 6 feet and very lean. He took a couple of long strides in my direction and I instinctively sent a round sailing above his head into the tree line. He was freaky as hell, but he hadn't really threatened me. What would I tell the cops? He stopped dead in his tracks and hunched down on all fours. I yelled out, "The next one will F you up. Go away." He stayed on all fours and this time I had my sights on the center of him. His eyes were just above the grass like a large cat or something. I was trying to stop my trembling and knew that my voice cracked a little on the last warning. I was terrified. That standoff probably only lasted a couple of minutes, maybe less, but it felt like forever. In an instant, he bolted left towards the tree line and opposite of the road. So much for not being able to walk. I couldn't keep him in my scope, he was moving so fast. He disappeared into the brush and I sent another round sailing high in his direction. I bolted to my truck and I wanted to get out of there. I could hear him in the distance, yelling in this weird sound that could have been a laugh or a cry. I scrambled up the trail and arrived at my truck breathless. I tossed my gear into the cab but kept the rifle in the passenger seat and sped off. I reported to Fish and Game, but all they did was scold me for hunting at night alone, and I never got an update. It wasn't until I told this story at a camping trip that my nephew told me about Wendigos, rakes, and skinwalkers. My story scared the piss out of him because the spot we were camping was technically the same forest I'd seen that bastard. He was so spooked that his mom had to take him home and she was really pissed. I'm not sure what that thing was, but I dodged quite a bullet that night. I've been married to my husband Thomas for 6 years. He has a chronic heart condition that made him suffer for years. We have 2 kids together and he adores them but couldn't be with them all the time or do normal activities together due to his condition. I work to be able to pay for rent, expenses, and medical bills, which is the hardest. It's been like this for years. Thomas's health is greatly declining and we recently were able to get him a device to improve his heart function, but it's not a long-term solution. Lately, Thomas has been asking me or the kids to sleep in bed with him. Before that, he used to sleep alone for medical reasons, including using his catheter or having medical devices in his hand and chest. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks and said he missed me and the kids, although I was with him often. Last night, he was talking to me about what the kids told him they wanted to become when they grow up. He took his time to talk because this was a highly emotional moment for him. He kept telling me that he knew he wasn't going to witness how our kids will turn out and what they will become when they grow up. He said he'd be lucky if he could attend their next birthday, which I admit could be an exaggeration on his part, but I let him vent out what's been bothering him. He then started talking about us and asking me what I would do if he passed away. Those questions I couldn't find an easy answer for, but he proceeded to ask if I was going to start over with someone new. He pulled my face close to his and said he wanted me to promise to never date anyone after him no matter what. I don't know why, but I froze in my place. He kept looking at me and telling me to promise him in front of our kids. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel hesitant. I had a very odd feeling and something told me not to do it, especially not when he decided to get the kids involved. I pulled away and assured him that he's the love of my life and everything I care about as well as our children. He got upset, saying I was avoiding his request and said he didn't expect me to even hesitate, let alone refuse to promise. I calmly explained how heavy his words were, but he said I probably had no problem seeing and dating someone else and might as well get the kids a new dad. I swore I'd never force my kids to call someone else dad, and he flat out called me a liar to my face. This made me speechless. He loudly told me to get out of the room. I tried to get him to calm down, but he started yelling at me to stop talking to him after I made it clear that he didn't mean much to me. He said he's going to make the kids promise that if I ever meet someone new, then they should cut me out of their lives and stay with his family. I was in shock and I called him unreasonable for thinking this was an acceptable thing to do to our kids. He said I should be happy the kids will live with their grandparents and not some guy and get married to. He kept insulting me until I broke down crying. He asked me to leave the room and threatened to pull his canola if I stayed. I left because I didn't want him to get himself hurt over an argument. I felt so bad to the point where I wish I said yes to his promise if I knew that he was going to react this way. Everyone keeps telling me to have some grace and be patient because Thomas is dealing with so much right now, but they keep forgetting that I'm struggling too. I'm not sure if I can take it anymore. What should I do? In high school, I was friends with this girl named Sarah. One day, she caught me trying to steal $50 from her during our group project. She requested the teacher not to work with me. I got very mad because she could have just talked it out. Back then, I was an angry and volatile person. So what follows is, well, nothing I'm too proud of. I ended up spreading rumors about her that she had Marfan syndrome, which isn't true, and that she's a racist Trump supporter. After I did this, no one wanted to be her friend. We went to a small high school. She literally had no one. I even turned her best friend against her and made up a bunch of stuff that she never even said. I tried to make her everyday life as difficult as possible. In the end, I put a photo of her Photoshop with her abuser in the yearbook who doesn't attend our high school. From what I heard, she cried and cried when she saw it. She knows I did it because I signed my name at the bottom. I also made a bunch of Tumblr posts talking trash about her and she saw all of them. Shortly after this, she went rogue. She packed up, cut everyone off, and moved far, far away to another major city. This was about 6 years ago. She still has me blocked on all social media to this day. Recently, I found out through my former English teacher that she's a law student and I was thinking about messaging her. Since high school, I discovered that I'm bipolar and I want to reach out to her and see how she's doing and tell her about my diagnosis. A mutual says that I shouldn't reach out and that Sarah specifically asked them not to reveal her whereabouts or what she's doing to me. This really stung because that was 6 years ago and it shouldn't still bother her. I feel like I should have the opportunity to express myself and my diagnosis. I feel like while what I did was wrong, it should be water under the bridge now. Would I be the asshole to contact the girl I bullied in high school? I'm 49 and my wife Kelly is 46. We've been together for almost 20 years. We each travel frequently for long periods of time for work and family, so several years ago we decided to open up our marriage. This was originally her idea and I wasn't sure how it would go, but it's been great. It takes the pressure away from the time that we do get to spend together between travels. It took about 2 years to completely figure out the rules that work best for us, but it's been working perfectly ever since. These rules include that we're not required to tell each other who we're sleeping with unless we specifically ask, and we cannot tell each other who they can and cannot sleep with. We can discuss it, but in the end it's only up to the partner involved. Last year, I started to become close with one of our neighbors, Sasha, who's 19. We started walking my dog together, going running together, watching TV together, and eventually doing more. We still haven't slept together because she wants to take things slow, which I'm alright with. Kelly's noticed that Sasha and I have gotten close, but it wasn't until last week when she found the receipts from gifts I'd bought for Sasha that she straight up asked whether or not we were together. Following the rules we'd set up, I said yes. Kelly got incredibly mad and started yelling at me about how Sasha was too young, even though nothing even started between us before she was 18. She ended up insulting me and calling me names, and I removed myself from the situation so she could calm down. Later, we had a calmer discussion about it. She told me to stop seeing Sasha. I reminded her of our rule and brought up the recent example of when I followed the rule even though I didn't like it. Last winter, one of Kelly's coworkers made a slightly rude comment to me in passing that prompted me to ask Kelly if she was sleeping with him. She said she was, and when I asked her to stop, she said no, and I accepted it because that was the rule. I don't see how this is any different. Sasha is a consenting adult and has been for our entire relationship. I get that 19 is young and I probably wouldn't just go out and pursue some random 19-year-olds, but Sasha has lived next door for 10 plus years, so there was already a very deep level of trust between us. Then Kelly threatened to tell Sasha's mother about us, which I felt crossed the line. I told her that it was extremely inappropriate to take revenge on Sasha just because she's jealous of her. That set Kelly off again, and after yelling at me some more and storming off, she's been giving me the cold shoulder all week. I love Kelly and want to make things work, but this is getting ridiculous. I see that this has struck a nerve, but we set those rules together and they've been working for us for years. I don't see why suddenly she's unhappy with them. How do I pacify Kelly so that she won't tell Sasha's mother about us while still upholding the rules that we agreed on together? This is why you should be careful walking home alone at night. When I was around 17, I was coming home on my own on a Thursday night after being out at a pub with some friends. We had been out a little more centrally in the city, so I had to take a bus on my own to get home to my residential neighborhood. I had done this route hundreds of times, so I didn't see it as being particularly dangerous, especially as I live in a fairly nice neighborhood. It was only about 11 p.m., but because I live in a residential area and it was the middle of a working week, when I got off the bus at my stop, it was absolutely dead and there was no one around. Again, this didn't spook me. It's only about a 5 to 10 minute walk from the bus stop to my house. As I turned down a long street that leads towards my house, I noticed a guy walking further down the street. This put me a little on edge, but I was reassured by the fact that he had his back to me and was walking away from me. As I kept walking down, I noticed the guy turn around and clock me. That's fine, I thought. I always turn around when I hear someone walking behind me at night, so nothing weird about that. However, I noticed as we got further and further down the street, he kept doing it. Kept checking I was still walking in the same direction as him. At this point, I'm starting to get pretty freaked out because I'm painfully aware that we're the only two people around. Just as I was weighing up what I should do, he turned down the path of one of the houses to our right and I breathed a sigh of relief. He's going into the house. The houses in my area are terraced with the front doors being kind of embedded into an enclave at the front of the house. What this means is that from where I was standing, about 50 feet away, I couldn't actually see the front door of the house, as it was obscured by the wall. However, I saw him walking down the path and disappear into the front door enclave, so my logical conclusion was that he was letting himself into his house. I can't describe exactly what made me feel like this, but after the initial feeling of relief wore off, I suddenly got this really bad feeling and I stopped walking and just stood there. There was a tiny voice in my head that said, what if he was just faking you out? The feeling became so strong that I stepped off of the pavement and ducked down behind the parked car and just waited. After a couple of minutes of crouching behind the car, staring at the house, I saw movement and my heart stopped. The man came back down the path, out into the street and was looking around, looking for me. He must have been waiting for me in the doorway, knowing that if I kept walking, I wouldn't see him until it was too late. Unfortunately for him, his hiding place also meant that he couldn't see me, so when I didn't walk past as he anticipated, he had to come back out into the street and try to work out where I was. Looking back now, I probably should have called the police at this point, but as a scared teenager, I sprinted down one of the roads running perpendicular to the street we were on, as I knew I could use it to take a slightly longer route home. I didn't stop running until I got home, where I quickly double locked the door behind me. Amazingly, I didn't think to wake anyone in the family up. I literally just went to bed and woke up the next morning and went to school. Always trust your gut. 2 months ago, I became unexpectedly pregnant, despite being on birth control and despite the fact that I'm 41 years old. To be honest, it was a shock. My SO and I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and honestly, the thought of a second child wouldn't be in our future. It's not that we didn't want one, but given my age and our financial situation, it seemed best to be happy with our beautiful daughter. When my period didn't come, I honestly thought I might be starting menopause early. When my pregnancy test showed positive, I had so many mixed emotions, both happy and scared. In the end, we decided we would make it work and we would love another child and have another sibling for our daughter. Because of my age, my OB suggested I do genetic testing and screening for potential problems. Yesterday, I got the call that my baby has a 90% chance of Down syndrome. Also, that the baby was a boy. I'll have another test next week just to confirm what we basically know. My heart is ripping apart. As much as I already love this baby, as much as I want him, I look into the future and it's not good. Financially, a special needs child would be near impossible for us. I also worry about what this would do for my daughter's future. Not just financially, but as I'm an older woman, who would be tasked to take care of him when I could not? How can I place that burden on my living child? We can't know the severity of his disabilities until he's born, but what kind of a life am I laying out before him? I'm leaning towards terminating the pregnancy now, and it's still very early, but I am truly torn. I'm full of guilt and doubt. Afraid of making the wrong choice. I would honestly like to hear other opinions or experiences who have either been in my position or have a special needs child. I adopted my dog Tank when I was 20. He had minor issues like leash walking and prey drive. Issues that I fixed. This dog is a saint, never bit anyone or shown any aggression. He's very well trained and now he's 5 years old and 60 pounds. My boyfriend and I live in an apartment with my dog. We moved in together last year, but we've been dating for 4 years. In December, my boyfriend's mom invited herself to come visit us in the summer. Now when she decided this, we were under the impression that she would stay at a hotel or something. We live in a small, really small 2-bedroom apartment, but we use the second room as a shared office space. But whatever, we'll deal. We can throw in a bed and move the room around. However, 3 weeks ago, she was talking to my boyfriend saying she would be staying for 2 weeks because she wanted to sightsee and because she really wanted to be with us. I could tell he was happy about this because he misses her and doesn't get to see her a lot because we live so far away from her. I wasn't going to argue with it because I know it makes him happy. However, then she called again last week. She told my boyfriend that she wouldn't feel comfortable if Tank was in the apartment with her because he's big and you can't trust dogs like that. She said she didn't feel comfortable with his size or breed. Also that he could be unpredictable because I got him a yearish old and don't know about his past. She asked my boyfriend if he would have my dog boarded the whole time while she was there. He brought it up 3 days ago and I immediately said no. He asked me if I would think about it and I said no again. Now he's angry with me. I'm fine with everything else, but I draw the line at leaving Tank in a boarding facility for 2 weeks straight. I've never done something like that with him. I don't want to risk anything. I even looked into it just at the pricing and it's too expensive. This is his home and he deserves to stay here. I've never had a problem with her before, but this is ridiculous. She's never met Tank in person before and she gets a lot of pictures and videos of him. When we video chat her, sometimes he joins in. She's never said anything about her concerns before. He isn't a bad dog, but she doesn't want him at the apartment at all while she's there. Am I the asshole because I won't board Tank while she visits? Part 2, am I the asshole for not sending my dog to boarding while my boyfriend's mom visits? After about a week of silence, waiting for each other to bring this up, I bypassed my boyfriend and went to his mom. I reached out and talked about her feelings for Tank. It started out pleasant. Then I told her BF said that she wanted my dog boarded. I asked why she didn't feel comfortable with Tank. Her direct quote was, "You don't know what his past is. He's big and unpredictable and I don't want to be staying with that. It would be different if you knew, but you don't. I just don't feel comfortable sharing a space with a dog that may attack me for going to pee in the middle of the night or grabbing a cup of water." I was angry and didn't want to scream to make her upset, so I said very politely, "If you don't feel comfortable living with Tank for 2 weeks, even though your own son has been since August, you can stay in a hotel while you visit." And I hung up on her. My boyfriend got home a few hours later and was angry because I talked to her, made her upset, and then hung up on her. Now she thinks I hate her. He said I wasn't being fair to her. I asked why he wanted me to board Tank so badly. He knows he wouldn't attack her or do anything aggressive towards her. All he had to say was boiled down to, "Can't you just do it to make this whole thing easier? He's a dog." We argued at some point in circles. How Tank is a dog, he doesn't get rights in the apartment, and things got worse when I asked what would happen in the future if we were still together and she decided to visit when we were living in a house. He said that it would be different.
It's in the small mistakes that you find your way. It's in the morning. It's in the morning breeze. I'm blinded by the darkness that's inside me. I'm leaving, oh, can someone help me?